So there's an interesting question these days, particularly within the current landscape of the pros and cons of diversity and inclusion targets. My view is actually very clear and very straightforward. What gets measured gets done in organisations. We at FAIRA are clear that discrimination, inequity is alive and well. So therefore we have to have a spotlight on that. So our view is that if we don't have measurements, targets, KPIs, etc., we take our foot off the pedal. So we definitely want to have a laser sharpness on targets in relation to diversity, which is representation, but also we want targets on inclusion, psychological safety, etc. at work. So that's our view. One of the things that we are also clear on is not to confuse targets or what we might call positive action with positive discrimination and quotas. So very briefly, positive discrimination is a quota system where we have issues of underrepresentation, and when we're making a decision, whether it's a hiring decision or a promotion decision, we will factor diversity into that decision-making process. So we will look at the number of women, people of colour, etc., that we have in our leadership team, for example, and that will be a part of that decision-making process. That actually would be illegal in the UK. In the UK, we can't do quotas and we can't do positive discrimination. What we can do is something called positive action. And positive action is a form of encouragement. So as long as we have data that shows issues of underrepresentation for a period of 12 months or more, we can then put job adverts out to say, hey, we are underrepresented by a particular group, come and apply for us because we're a great place to work. You can apply that in terms of a development program and promotions, etc. So while I wouldn't advocate for positive discrimination or quotas, I would advocate for positive action and targets, because targets keeps a laser focus on where we need to be. And that's the fundamental distinction between those principles and also what's legal and what's illegal in the UK anyway. As we enter the, let's call it the current phase of inclusion management, there's a critique of targets, actually diversity targets. The critique goes like this: we don't want to give somebody a job because they are X, Y, and Z. And that is true and that is correct, actually. We don't want to perceive or in reality give unfair advantages to people just because they are something that we are not. But I am of the viewpoint that in life as a whole, particularly within the corporate space, what gets measured does get done. So while I'm not in favour of quotas, which would be an articulation of utilising difference as a mechanism for either hiring or progression, I think actually a laser sharp focus on targets is still something that we need to keep. And that target doesn't have to be a diversity metrics. It could be something on representation. And let's be frank here. The representation of women in corporate spaces is not where it needs to be. The representation of people of colour is not where it needs to be. People with invisible identities, disability, LGBT groups, etc., etc. So there's a risk that if we take our foot off the pedal on targets because of the political noise, we take a strategic lens off the point of representation, which we can't do. So I think we should keep a laser focus on representation, which lends itself to a measurement question, but we should also ask that question in terms of inclusion as well. So while we do want metrics or targets or goals or whatever term we want to use, we need to make sure that we're measuring belonging, psychological safety, well-being at work and the rest of it. So I'm not a fan of quotas. I think they're problematic for all sorts of reasons. And it might sound like we're sort of playing with words, but I do hold on to the notion of what gets measured gets done. And that would lead me back to a question around some kind of goal, metric or target.